Yes, I'm here with Ian again, and we're continuing our Robin Hood series. This one is a little further in the Howard Pyle book called How Little John Lived at the Sheriff's House, and we'll kind of do a little summary and then discuss the story.
Yep.
Uh, so Little John won a contest, and so the sheriff kind of offer made him an offer to join his group and kind of a similar offer to the one Robin Hood gives his men. And um, Little John joins him, becomes his favorite, his right hand man. And then so we have some little group dynamics here, and he ends up kind of going back to Robin Hood after, of course, some feasting and some fighting.
Of course.
So so yeah, Little John had been with the sheriff for about 6 months, and he kind of got fat and lazy. At the beginning of this story, the sheriff is out with some nobles, some bigwigs of the town, and they're hunting for deer. And the sheriff thinks back to Little John and wishes he was there as a good hunter and his sort of favorite companion. And then the story goes back to where Little John is, back at the sheriff's castle, and he's just sleeping. And even though the sun's kind of getting up there, and he wakes up and he hears the bugle call of the hunting, and he kind of thinks back to how he used to be with his old companions, Will Stutely, his favorite, and Robin Hood, and all of them, and kind of feels a little nostalgic. And now that it's getting warm, the weather's getting warm again, and everything, he kind of feels like maybe he should be out there doing these manly sports and everything. So he goes over to the larder, the pantry, and it's guarded by this steward. And he's kind of a very fat man, kind of has the keys jangling on his belt there. And Little John asks him, for some food, and he tells Little John, "Go get it yourself." And they kind of have a little exchange. Little John tries the door, and it's locked, of course. And so he just breaks open the pantry. The steward goes over, tries to prevent him from doing that. Physically, Little John hits him, knocks him out. And the cook across the courtyard hears this. And so he goes running over with, of course, like a bird on a spit or something like that in his hand. And the steward offers him some wine and some money or something to kind of take care of the problem of Little John as he sees it. The steward also doesn't like Little John because he's jealous of how close Little John is to the sheriff. Um, and so the steward runs away. The cook draws his sword. Steward doesn't like the look of violence, look of the sword. Um, and the steward tells Little John, "Okay, we're going to fight over this now." Little John kind of looks at him, looks at the food in the pantry, and goes, I mean, if we're going, one of us is going to go to heaven by the end of the day today anyway. We might as well go the full belly, huh? How about? So then they go and kind of eat together, and of course they have this merry big feast, and they're kind of eyeing each other as they're eating, sticking their fingers into the pie or whatever, and they're kind of thinking, "Man, this guy's like as the book says, the lustiest guy I've ever set eyes on." So they eat and eat until they're bursting, and then it's about time to do their thing, and they both sing a song. So it's a little bit of a ritual kind of thing. Of course, there's the songs are kind of about longing and suffering and companions, and then coming back to your companions and everything. At least Little John's song is, and and losing a love and all that stuff. Uh, And then so then they fight, and it's a little reminiscent of the fight of the fight between Robin Hood and Little John when those two met. Uh, and they go back and forth for an hour. No one's winning. They're both exhausted. They lean on their swords, and they kind of, still looking at each other as kind of growing admiration, companionship, and they kind of Little John sort of points out or excuse me, the cook sort of points out, well, why am I even trying to fight this guy? I mean, this guy's like my better friend than this weaselly little steward anyway, and wasn't really worth it to be paid 10 shillings or whatever the guy offered. And so Little John again kind of negotiates with him, and he's like, "Hey, we're like the two strongest guys here. Why are we fighting each other? Why don't we just take this food, take some of the silver of the sheriffs, and be off on our merry way and join Robin Hood, so he can kind of, have his cake and eat it too." And the cook agrees, and so they go back to Robin Hood with all this stolen loot, and they tell them what's been going on. Everybody's happy to see Little John, but Robin Hood is a little grave, as the story says, I think. And he doesn't like how Little John has sort of unjust, in the telling of this story anyway, how Little John has unjustly taken things from the sheriff. The sheriff hasn't really done anything at this point to deserve this kind of retribution. Robin Hood kind of tallies up what they've taken from the sheriff or other nobles, and that was sort of tit for tat, something like that. It was in his mind justified, but he's kind of even with the sheriff now, I guess, and this is going too far. There may be something about him stealing food from the sheriff too, which is a little bit different than just stealing the silver. Um, so Little John, kind of decides, on the spot to make it up, and so he goes out to where the sheriff and the nobles are hunting the deer, hunting the hart, and he lures the sheriff over to where Robin Hood and his men are by saying there's this big herd of deer that I was afraid to spook, and you can come because if we bring all these people over, they'll hear us coming and they'll run away. So he kind of goes with them, and then here's the deer and the herd that I was talking to you about, and it's Robin Hood and his men. Sheriff, of course, downcast, doesn't know what to do. They make fun of him a little bit. He's kind of like looking down. And then basically, the Robin Hood kind of has him drink with him a little bit and, drink with the sheriff's own silver and everything, kind of a little bit of a humiliation or a little bit of a kind of sign of dominance or something. And but then he tells him, this is not what we're really about. When I've stolen from nobles and fat friars and on the road or whatever, it's because they've been kind of doing that to the people and whatnot. And this is not what we're really about. So gives them back the silver, and so the sheriff, in being paid back, hauls back this big bag of silver back to the group of nobles he was originally hunting with, and still humiliated, but kind of nothing is really taken from him materially this time. Of course, his pride is hurt again, whatever ego he has left, and he kind of sulks back to. I don't know if he keeps going hunting or, if he's maybe thinks that's enough drama for a day. But yeah, so that was how that was how Little John ends his tenure with the sheriff.
Yeah. Yeah, spot on. I really like this one. It was just so like in a good way stereotypical. Like it was
Yeah.
so like I don't know, boys adventure comics or like
Yeah.
it felt again, I think I said this before with the other ones, but it feels like an anime or a manga or something. Like it's just these guys like, I'm gonna beat you up. Well, we're friends, but we're gonna fight anyway.
That's right.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That partnered with like the old-timey language is
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. It's all within this world of there's danger on the periphery, danger of starvation or chaos or violence, upheaval, but it's all within it's still within this state safe kind of cushion from all that stuff. And so, yeah, it's kind of like a children's tale in that way.
Yeah. And they're the places where the danger comes in or where things get awkward within that sort of safe area is always dealt with. It always ends up going well because somebody behaves honorably, which is
Yeah.
both, good children's literature and I think a pointer towards something important in life, even if it's not rationally obvious, still things I think work out better when we're honorable.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The morality is still kind of in charge, no
Mhm.
matter sort of what is happening. Things, you know, uh, going against the sheriff, the things are kind of uh, uh, it's not clear what the order of things is, but still, what the order of things is politically. There's still things are in flux, but things are not chaotic because morality is still in the driver's seat. There's still people there's some evil, some cowardliness, but still people, like you said, people act honorably.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I've been thinking about Little John in this the in the chapter right before this that you were talking about, he's in a archery contest of some sort. Um and he goes to that. He's dressed head to toe in red instead of green. So he's changed his color so he's, sneaky. He's not noticeable. But I was noticing this fun parallel with that happening around like this time of year, like the fall in October.
Huh.
So, red leaves, dressed head to toe in red. And then he goes to the sheriff's house. So he goes indoors and he gets fat and lazy, which I mean, it's sort of a hibernating winter kind of
Yeah.
and then where we see him again at the start of this chapter, he's yawning, he's waking up late in bed, the sun's already up, he looks out the window and he hears a bugle call. So he hears some call coming from the outside. It describes the smell of the woodbine. I think that's flowers and that spring is here and so there's this like the external world is coming back to life and we see little John sort of waking up in his own life and there's this interesting like interplay which I was going to talk about just that on its own but then you were saying about morality and I realized that you have this. So if Little John is sort of standing in for like nature or something natural, he's active in the fall and then kind of falls asleep, wakes up in the spring. He also in the spring gets a little carried away, right? He's like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm gonna eat all this food. I'm gonna beat this guy up. I'm gonna smash through this door. I'm gonna fight this cook. We're gonna be buddies. We're gonna sing songs. We're gonna get drunk, and then let's steal all this stuff and go. So he's very boisterous. He's got a lot
Nice.
of energy.
Yeah.
And then he gets carried away in that energy, and he brings that, the sort of the results of that to Robin Hood, and Robin Hood is like, look, morality, like be a little more thoughtful. Don't get so carried away. Like you shouldn't have stolen from the sheriff. I think there's a line in there about like maybe when Robin Hood's talking to the sheriff or when he's talking to the men, he's like, none of the sheriff's basically the people under him, his tenants, none of them have complained. So he's not ill-using them, which I think is the reason he gets to keep his silver.
Ah,
A couple chapters earlier, Robin Hood shows up as a butcher, and the sheriff doesn't realize because the sheriff's pretty dumb. The sheriff doesn't realize it's Robin Hood, and he tries to rip off the butcher. He tries to like take advantage of this seemingly dumb guy, and so Robin Hood, in revenge, takes advantage of the sheriff and takes a bunch of money from him.
I see.
So he references that a little bit in this one. I read the earlier chapters just because I like knowing what's going on and I had the time to do it. Um, but again, you see Robin Hood being like, no, we only, I think we started talking about this as him being like a sort of a noble trickster figure. And he's like, here we see him being like, no, we are only here to address the wrongs. We are not here to fulfill our own wildness and our own longing for adventure. Like we get to fulfill our adventure by righting the wrongs because the system is corrupt. But we don't, he's being very careful not to become a corrupt system himself.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is great. Yeah. Yeah, him so you're starting to say that so the time of year is spring um and little John is kind of waking up and then he kind of gets carried away. But what were you saying before that? You were starting to talk about just he hears the call and you were gonna say something about the literature of it around there.
Um, hmm. I think the other thing I had in mind about that was that Little John is sort of, in the thing that I'm just sort of laying out here that's just occurring to me right now based on what you were saying about the morality of it. Um, Little John sort of is enacting the role of nature, the
Mm,
role of like, because if you think about, if there are no evil people, you know, as a thought experiment, either everybody's good and just does the best that they can, or there's no people and it's just animals and trees and stuff.
mm,
Like the world's still not fair and just.
mm,
Bad stuff still happens, but oftentimes it's just a case of like a river flooding its banks or a disease being able to like get into a population and like cause havoc because their immune system isn't or a forest fire or whatever it is like
mhm,
that sort of we see Little John sort of enacting the like, oh, it's a natural overflowing of energy that's causing some chaos,
mm,
um, to which if Robin Hood hadn't made that right, the sheriff would then have moral grounds to come after Robin Hood,
mm,
because he's been taken advantage of at a time where like he didn't his people aren't complaining about him. There's no reason for that to happen. So um you sort of get the ideal human behavior of like it's our job. I mean, I think it's even in the Bible they talk about being like stewards, humanity being stewards of the world. Like we're here to sort of care for it and try and make it better, not make it better for ourselves, but make it better for everything.
mm,
And you see Robin Hood sort of like addressing this sort of natural overabundance, this natural overenthusiasm, so that it maintains justice, it maintains fairness. Um, I don't know if that's what you were asking, but I also don't have anything else that I remember sort of in my head. So you can either ask a more detailed question, I could try and unpack, or we can just go from there.
No, no, yeah, that sounds good. I wasn't sure what you were saying before. I was kind of uh yeah, unsure, but
Hmm.
that was good in itself.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you're framing this as kind of like a boy's tale or sort of like anime or something. Yeah, the one destructive force here is still that of a bear kind of waking a bear-like human, Little John, who's not little at all, and he's kind of waking up and yeah, his banks, the waters of a river's banks are overflowing, and so it's not this malevolent force or something in the world, but it does have to be dealt with. And so yeah, so he hears the bugle call and he doesn't go out, he goes to try to eat. And then we have the first kind of a steward of society, of things that humans have by their organization and efforts and intelligence have set up. So we have a pantry being guarded by this steward, but instead of being someone who kind of has good judgment for the common good, Little John is a member of their group. He's a fellow human being, etc. Maybe regulate what he eats and give him some food. But instead, he decides to play some petty games. And when that doesn't work, when Little John is able to just by natural force and violence, just able to break the sort of walls that society has set up by breaking through the pantry, then the steward when he can't deal with it himself, he calls, he gets the cook to try to deal with it, and then he starts to again misuse society's resources by kind of bribing him to fight Little John. Ideally, if you have some sort of conflict in society, uh, the side of the just will just have force on its side. So ideally, you'll have someone be able to stop Little John or regulate Little John, or a force like that, instead of have to be bribed or something. So this is again a sign of corruption when people are not doing what they're tasked with doing. Uh, just like the earlier Robin Hood's origin story with the forester. And so things get out of hand. And then you have to do something further corrupt because things have not been set up the right way, because you don't have justice, morality kind of uh, greasing the wheels of the workings of society. You have to try to uh, needle your way through things and kind of make things up as you go along because you haven't been doing things the right way at all. And then so the two forces of physical strength, Little John and the cook here, which that's a perennial kind of thing in society, how to make sure those who would be the army defend you and don't overextend themselves and also don't prey on the population. So then they end up kind of realizing, hey, nobody's watching us here, and why are we fighting anyway? Let's just take all this stuff and just make off with it. We're the strong guys. So that's just what nature would do, right? That's the bear takes the food that's just there because the bear is strong. That's sort of the law of nature. So
Yeah. No, that's great. I got a couple of things to say to that. I think like one that I love the way you sort of lay out the steward as a stand-in for the whole corrupt regime. That, if we are looking at Robin Hood through the trickster lens, and the trickster comes because the social order is unbalanced and those who are in charge are not taking care of those who are under their care. You have a steward who, one, isn't the sheriff, so he's not even within the household. He's not the rightful decider of things, but he's flaunting his authority. He's refusing to feed the member of the household who has a right to food. And from everything they say in the book, like the steward never gives a rational reason as to why. He's just
yeah,
like, no, I don't want to feed you. Go get your own food.
yeah.
You lost your chance. Too bad, you bastard.
I
Like
I
very
think he gives
selfish.
a pretext, like so he says like it's too late, as in you're supposed to eat breakfast early. He
Mm,
finds some little kind of pretext for denying the food.
mhm.
But yeah, it's not a real reason.
Yeah,
It's not a
yeah. I mean,
legitimate reason.
yeah. I mean, if you're the steward and there's someone in the household who's hungry and you have the key to the food, like you're not the one that's supposed to be disciplining the troops. You're
So
supposed to be making sure the food, like you said, you're supposed to be making sure the food. If he had done his job and been like, oh, okay, we can feed you, but let me go get you some food. So he goes in, cuts a piece of the pie, gives him like a piece of the chicken, a little glass of drink or whatever, a little bag of meat. I don't know what they're drinking. And he
yeah,
brings that and he's like, here's your food. Then Little John would be like, okay, and he'd eat the food and he wouldn't be smashing everything.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah, exactly. And then unless you have something to say to that.
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. The other thing you were saying about the cook, I thought that was also really cool. Just um, you have sort of the caste system of sorts. You have sort of the rulers, and then you have the warriors. And the cook, although the cook is not in and of himself a cook, is not a policeman. He's functioning as one here. He comes in with the chicken on a spit, ready to like smash somebody with it. And then once that doesn't isn't necessary, for whatever reason, he puts the chicken down, but he's got a sword. So he's a cook, like carrying a sword with him, which is I found that really kind of out of character,
Huh.
but it works for the story.
Mm.
Like if I'm cooking in the kitchen and I'm like trying to roast a game hen, and like especially back in those days, I don't know if I'm gonna want a sword in a
Seems kind of
scabbard. Like
cumbersome. I gotta,
exactly, exactly. But you're right. He serves the purpose of the steward is unable to enforce the law, so the cook has to enforce. Somebody has to, so he comes in to enforce the law, and he's behaving justly. And he is in his power, and Little John is in his power, and they sort of recognize each other in that way. And I think that's where some of the misdeeds of the steward begin to be kind of balanced out because they see each other. Like the cook does not bow to the steward's illegitimate rulership,
Mm.
and if he had, then the cook and Little John probably would not have been friends. But the cook is sort of like, well, I'm supposed to do this, and I don't know who you are, but you're causing some chaos, so I'm going to deal with it. Oh, hey, you're actually pretty cool. Yeah, I don't like that steward either. Um, okay, so then he kind of like gets on board, and as always in these Robin Hood stories, whether it's Robin Hood and Little John, or I think it was Robin Hood and the Tinker, maybe a few other people that get won over. They're all won over by sort of the justness of the cause, or the lustiness, the sort of like,
Yeah, I
which
think that
is
too.
yeah, yeah. Um, which to my mind is just sort of like when you are living according to your own personal morals and you feel like you're having a good life, you usually have more, in a Freudian term, you have more libido, you have more life energy. You're more able to do things, you're more able to focus, like you're just kind of more alive because you're aligned inside.
Yeah.
And you see that with Little John here quite a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree with that last part. Yeah, they're physically vigorous. I mean, so I should say that yeah, the cook maybe goes into the fight partially because of the incentive, the monetary incentive that the steward has given him. But then yeah, it's like the presumptiveness or the fakeness of that motive melts away as they get into their lusty battle. So there is the sort of contest of strength, but sort of a warrior ethos that comes in, but also nature that comes in. And yes, I agree with you that part of that part of that whole dynamic is where the mind and the body are kind of integrated, or that's how I think of it. That, you're sort of integrated as a whole, your mind, your body, the society, other people, and this weaseliness, this petty jealousy of the fat steward kind of playing his games when his initial kind of just tyranny over Little John didn't work, because it's a little tyranny, right? If you play this little game, you don't do your job, you don't help this person out, which is your job, who's a member of your community, and you start to try to uh, step into a position of control over them. So if Little John had said, well, okay, I guess I can't have any food today just because you've arbitrarily decided not to give me food, then the steward starts to have something over Little John, and maybe Little John's libido or his sort of lustiness sort of falls, and he sort of stops kind of being favored by the sheriff because of that. He's sort of dopey and mopey a lot, and so when
Yeah,
that steward's game doesn't work, then yeah, the nature comes back, and these two young bucks kind of they fight for a while, but then they kind of reason after that what is better, and
yeah.
although yeah, they don't have the oversight that Robin Hood then later provides for them and saying, hey, this was not a moral action.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you had when you were doing the summary, you had said something about Little John saying like, well, since one of us is going to die, why don't we eat first? And I feel like that's it's like a call to something common, like, hey, I see you, you're a person, I'm a person, we both need to eat. If we're going to die, don't we both want to make sure we eat something nice first and we can go do that? Like there's a comradeship,
Mm.
camaraderie. That's the
Mm.
word. So there's a camaraderie there. There's a commonness of like seeing the other person as a human and caring for their needs that, as you point out, the steward completely bails on. He doesn't care.
Uh,
He wants to be the
yeah.
tyrant. He doesn't want to take care of others. So the first act that little John does towards the cook is this call of camaraderie, of common good. And they eat together. They're both stuffed. They're both impressed by how well the other one eats. They're both impressed by how well the other one drinks.
And sings.
And then they sing. Exactly, exactly. And I think I had something I wanted to kind of pull from those songs. Let me see if I can get them up on my phone here.
Thank you. Yeah, I was hoping you would. I glossed over those kind of terribly.
Oh, no worries. They're a little strange, and I wasn't sure. I think the only reason I even looked at them was because they were like, what is there? What is here? Is there anything here? And so I dug a little bit deeper, and the cook sings a song called "The Song of the Deserted Shepherdess."
Mm,
And there's sort of three stanzas. It's this shepherdess who is sad because shepherdess Fair Phyllis is sad, and she cries to the willow tree.
mm,
Uh, I'll take thy branches fair and twine a wreath to deck my hair, which is, I don't know about the willow tree if it's, in medieval time it was symbolic, but I can definitely see it being the weeping, the sort of the willow trees always have this sort of like falling feeling to them.
mm,
And so she's sort of symbolically showing her grief by this crown on her head.
mm,
And then she says, my Robin has deserted me, which I thought was interesting because it's, we're Robin Hood. So the name Robin kind of carries a little more weight here.
mm,
And so the second stanza, first stanza, she's sad. Second stanza, she says why she's sad. Her boyfriend uh, left her for somebody else.
mm,
And she's still making things for her hair. And then the third stanza is coming from the sea, as good as if he were the tide, young Corydon, which I guess is another name, comes over and sits beside Phyllis. And presently she changes her tune and stops moaning to the willow. So assume it's fair to assume this Corydon guy is pretty chill.
mm,
She seems to like him. She sort of gets over Robin. But what I see there is this would be more neat if they switched the names and Robin was the one
mhm,
who like comes over at the end. But you have this woman who's sort of been left, whose partner behaved poorly.
mm,
And then another partner comes back and she's like happy again. And
mm,
so there's a little bit of a mirroring of John under the sheriff
mhm,
and then John under Robin. It doesn't quite work because, like I said, the names are wrong and John was the one that left, but there's still this like move from one to the other one that makes you happy, right?
mm,
And then in the second song, it's a lot more stanzas. This is John singing to the cook. It's about King Arthur, but the whole point of as far as I can tell, the whole point of this song is um, this knight of Arthur's, uh, this good stout knight. He loved a lady fair, but she didn't want anything to do with him. And he left far away because he was sad. And he goes far away and he leaves this sort of dismissive woman. And he goes and he's sad and he cries and he moans. But still in his heart, he felt despair. Wait, let's see. But still his heart did feel the smart and eke the dire distress, and rather grew his pain more sharp as grew his body less. Okay, so he's still feeling sad at that point. Um, and then he goes back to where there was good drink and merry company, and soon ceases to cry and is happy again. And so there, I think that's a pretty fair accounting of the cook, of like the cook's not in love with somebody, but the cook is in a relationship with the sheriff and with his steward who don't seem to really care about him. And the sort of the moral or the directive, the teaching of the song is like, hey, if you're sad, go hang out with good company and you'll cheer up.
yeah.
And then, that's basically what happens to the cook. Not that he's necessarily sad up front, but it's sort of like if you were to sing that song to someone who was in ill employ, it may remind them that they are sad and that they would rather be in good company and they would be happier in good company. So it kind of lays some groundwork for bringing the cook over to the merry men.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's very good. Um yeah, so the cook, yeah, that good company, and that's what is drawing John back outside, right? He's when he hears at the beginning of the story when he hears the bugle, he's not thinking, "Oh, let's go join the sheriff who pays me well and keeps me comfortable and wants to according to this story, the sheriff is kind of missing Little John because he wants to impress the nobles around him. Like, look at this, kind of look at this. What could you say? Look at this guy I bought or something. It's not like they would think he's the comrade. But yeah, like look how strong I am reflected in in the glory of this noble lusty hunter, or the
Yeah.
not noble, but this strong lusty hunter,
Look who I
and
got working for me. Look at this guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, more when you were saying that, I was thinking a little bit like a gangster or something like that. Although maybe with gangsters there's also this more of a bond actually than even with the sheriff. Maybe that's not even comparable in some ways, at least with a sort of strong kind of mafia
There's still
type.
that, there's still that power differential though, and there's definitely, I
Yeah.
mean, in the mafia, you'll have like things will be going great, and the mob boss may like you, but then you fuck up, and he's just like, never mind. There's still that like,
That's right.
yeah, you're my buddy, you're great, but like if you do anything to piss me off, I'm probably gonna kill you, or
Yeah.
you're at least out on your ass.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
that's
That's right.
definitely the vibe I get from the sheriff.
Right, yeah. And that is definitely yeah, who he is. Yeah, that thank you. That's a very good point. And yeah, and so Little John's about to fight this cook over what? Like because I broke into the pantry, getting way over enthusiastic because this little fat guy was being a an asshole and he's and the cook's like, I'm gonna kill you or die because he paid me 10 shillings or whatever and gave me some wine or something. And he's a little imp that's just run away at the sight of swords. So yeah, they kind of realize what's good and true in life in their songs. I'm still wondering with the song that the cook sang to Little John, um, is yeah, what Robin 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 hath deserted me and left me for another love. I mean, what I think what you were saying is right is that the general dynamic is what happened to John, that the sheriff is kind of is not really very close to, or maybe I'm getting a little confused, but the sheriff is not very close to John, and John's looking to go back to Robin Hood because John, at least according to the Howard Pyle version, John never left Robin Hood because of some offense or something like that. It's just because maybe his desire for comfort and some status and food and everything. His again, you compared him like to Hungry Bear going into winter for hibernation 6 months before at the start of the fall or so. Um, and all of those creature kind of comfort desires kind of overwhelmed him, and he thought it was kind of a good deal and didn't really think he was really making a lifetime commitment or serious commitment anyway. But yeah, now he's kind of being drawn back into real things. But I thought with this first song from the cook, I mean, is he trying by naming the one that left uh the the sort of narrator or the main character of the song, is he trying to kind of isn't he kind of trying to say to Little John, hey, Robin left you, and now this other young Corydon uh, will be just as good or something like that. It kind of doesn't matter. Maybe he's trying to kind of pull the wool over his eyes.
I mean, I guess it could be, although I don't think the cook is even aware of Little John's connection to Robin Hood until after they fight, which I
Oh,
think they do
okay.
after the singing. So I don't
Mm.
think he's aware of it at this point. I think if anything, I mean, if I were writing this, I'll just critique Howard Pyle here. I don't even know anything about the guy. If I were writing this, I would not use the word Robin there to describe the person because it does sort of it feels like it's a clue, and yet it doesn't work out logically with the narrative. It's like it sort of points you in a direction, but then the narrative goes this way, and so you're sort of I feel a little bit lost trying to make sense of it. But also, I guess looking at it more closely, that particular stanza, she's singing about birds, and she says, "The thrush hath taken him a she, the robin too, and eke the dove." So the male thrush has a lady, the robin has a lady, and the dove does too. And then she says, "My robin has deserted me and left me for another love." So it could be just that he's trying to play off the name of a trying to find a bird that is also the name of a man to draw the parallel between like, oh, all the birds, it's springtime, all the birds are mating and pairing up, and my bird has left me. And Robin is kind of an obvious male name that comes from a bird. So
Mm.
it could just be that. Uh, we could definitely be overthinking it, and Howard Pyle was
Yeah.
just like, I like robins. You know, I'm going to put them in all my songs. Um, but also like if you want to get really conspiracy theory board about it,
Mm.
name dropping Robin in that place is a reminder. Um, and name dropping Robin in the opposite position might incentivize little John on sort of a subconscious inception type level. It might sort of plant an idea in his head that, oh, Robin, I know a Robin. Oh, but I was the one that left him. It's not, so like it's sort of because it's so 180 degrees, it would incline little John to think Robin and then think the opposite and then start to feel a little bit of guilt. So it could be some, 4D chess moves on Howard Pyle's part. But I certainly can't say either way.
Yeah, that seems like a very good analysis. I hadn't thought of that. So the cook, it seems like the cook couldn't have known that Little John was from Robin Hood service, so he can't be kind of inserting kind of a he probably isn't inserting some kind of message here.
Let's see. I don't think so. Yeah, because it's like right after that. So they sing. Um, the cook likes the song. Little John likes that the cook likes the song and says, "I love thee truly as if thou wert my brother." Cook says, "I love thee too, but the day is drawing on and I have to go cooking. So let's go settle this fight." And they fight a bunch, and they fight for an hour and more, neither striking the other a blow, though they strove their best to do so. Um, Ever and anon they rested panting. After getting their wind, as if they would go at it more fiercely than ever, Little John cries out, "Hold, good cook." And Little John says, "Truly thou art the best swordsman my eyes have ever seen." And they both sort of agree. They've impressed each other. And then, yeah, and then Little John says, "It seems to me that instead of striving to cut one another's throats, it were better to make us companions. What sayest thou? Will you join me in Sherwood and be part of Robin Hood's band?" And he tries to sell it. "The merry life, 7 good score companions, 3 suits of Lincoln green every year." And the cook says, "There are a man after my own heart. What's your name?" Um, they call me Little John. And the cook says, "What? You're Little John, and Robin Hood's own right-hand man?
Mm.
Many a time have I heard of thee, but never did I hope to set eyes upon thee. And it's even like, and wow, and that's you." Like he seems very impressed. Yeah, it says the cook seemed lost in amazement and looked upon his companion
Mm.
with open eyes. And John says, "I am indeed." So there's this sort of a Little John coming back into his own moment and being recognized. Somebody's
Mm.
like, "Oh," and the whole myth that Little John has cultivated amongst the people is sort of brought back and presented to him on the face and through the expression of this cook.
Mm.
Sort of like, "Oh my God, you're Little John." Um, and then yeah, and then they leave. They um
Yeah, they leave with their loot.
Yeah, they leave with their loot. Food, as much silver as they could lay their hands upon. And when they had drunk their fill of, I think, wine, whatever sack is, I think that's like cheap wine, or like, or easy wine, recent wine.
Wine cooler.
Um, yeah. uh, Wine spritzers. Then they run off into the woods. Yeah. And Robin Hood is very happy to see him. Oh yeah, you were saying something about, let's see if it says, no, it doesn't even say. I remember reading something about Little John. So the archery contest that Little John goes into town to win, dressed up all in red as this alternate character of his. The prize is like two fat cows or something. And I think the sheriff even says, like, I'm going to give kind of a shitty prize, so hopefully this Robin Hood guy doesn't show up. I don't want to deal with him anymore. And Little John's like, hey, I heard that he's given a shitty prize, so we don't show up. So like, I want to show up anyway. And Robin Hood's like, yeah, go for it, man. I don't want to bother the sheriff, any of that stuff anymore. So Little John kind of goes to town and does that, but then I think he accepts the offer to go into the sheriff's household so that maybe he can play a trick on the sheriff. Like he goes in with this intention of like being sneaky and finding out something about him or doing him dirty in some way. But then it's so comfortable he kind of forgets about it for 6 months.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense why he'd go in there. I didn't realize that from the previous story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I don't I'd have to I'm not gonna go scrolling through that right now, but that's what my memory's telling me. Um,
Yeah. But either way, yeah, the tone of his going into the sheriff's service was very light and playful. He was never really, when he comes back, that's shown by the fact that when he goes back to Robin Hood's men, they just welcome him with open arms. It's not like you traitor, we gotta find out what you're really about.
yeah, that's a good point. You would think after 6 months of him being at the sheriff, somebody would have either been like, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you hanging out with this guy for so long?" Or they'd be suspicious or something. But
Yeah.
nope, everything is always perfectly good amongst the band of brothers.
Yeah.
No suspicions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then what? Then they go, oh yeah, so little John goes to the sheriff, and the sheriff says, "Oh, Reynold Greenleaf, which is Little John's fake name.
Hmm.
Where have you come from and where have you been?" John says, "I've been in the forest. I saw a young hart all in green from tip to toe, from top to toe. And about him a herd of 30 deer, and they too were all green from head to foot." So he's telling like, you know, um, what do you call it? Tall tales. He's like, oh, there's a whole herd of green deer in the woods. Um, and you would think the sheriff would cotton on to what he means because the sheriff's already been tricked into the woods once,
Yeah.
a couple chapters ago. So, but no, the sheriff's pretty dumb. And he says, "What? Are you dreaming? Or are you serious?" And he says, "No, no, I'm not. I'm not crazy. You got to come and see it, but only you. Otherwise, they'll get scared away, like you said." Um, and yeah, and then Little John says, "See, there's the deer that I spoke to you of," and he's pointing at Robin Hood, uh, in the shade of a tree with all of his men about him. So they just kind of roll up on the whole gang, just sort of sitting there waiting for him. Another anime moment, just everybody
Yeah.
doing their hero pose or something. Yeah.
I wondered if we got deeper into this, we could kind of compare different versions or see how much of it was Howard Pyle. To me, the fact that Little John tells the sheriff, "I just saw a deer all in green and a whole pack of deer all in green." I mean that seems too much for anybody to believe. Even the sheriff. I mean, a green deer. I mean, he should he certainly knows to be careful being out in the woods with this pack of ragamuffins running around. So, you know,
Yeah.
that to me seems like maybe Howard Pyle's kind of very, very playful take or something like that.
It could be because I think a lot of the stuff he's pulling from is like, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of like Robin Hood plays from the very early. I don't remember the time, but like we don't have like pre-Shakespearean whatever that would be sort of excuse me, late medieval era maybe, but they would do like plays around town, like the Robin Hood play, and maybe they do one here, and then like in France they do a different one or something. Like they were sort of spread out, but there's no like sort of similar to Arthur. Like there's sort of these tales that were told everywhere and everybody kind of knew, but there's no like one canonical book or one canonical story. There's no Odyssey, there's no Iliad for these kinds of stories. And it would be interesting to kind of find something older and compare it to this and see like how much Pyle made up and how much is, pulled from something else.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun scholarship kind of thing to do. Um, what you were saying about this kind of being from kind of local in-person tellings, I've told you that I'm kind of interested in this kind of thing. I know you recently went to like in-person kind of storytelling, right? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting, by the way, you had said that one or both of those storytellers had gotten a Grimm's tale. So it's the Grimm's brothers interviewed people, got the living story from people, wrote it down. Someone a couple hundred years later or something, read it and reenacts it, bodily and kind of from their spirit, from not trying to get too woo or anything. I'm just saying, like, that's there's like a person
Yeah, it's
who
alive.
lived. There
It's
was no
it's
telepathy
lusty.
involved. Sorry.
It's lusty. It's alive.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's not just reading from a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm interested in that kind of thing. Just as a sidebar, interestingly, supposedly, so one of our viewers had mentioned that there was a version of a story. God, I'm blanking on it now. It'll come to me after the podcast is over. But uh, there was a Grimm's Brothers story that no, I think I'd done it with LL, and there was a Pushkin version that this viewer had seen, and I looked on the Wikipedia for it, and it said that there's a lot of evidence that Pushkin got that from oral storytellers who had gotten it at some point from the Grimm's version. So there had been the Grimm's written version that had somehow made its way closer to Russia and that had become an oral tale again, and that Pushkin then drew from and turned into a literary written tale. Which, if that account is true, it's interesting just to kind of see all that back and forth. But
That's fascinating. Wow.
yeah, but all that was an aside because I was kind of wanting to just kind of express the desire of myself and sort of want to know. I'm always trying to talk about this about you said how these Robin Hood tales had been plays in various localities, England, France, maybe other countries too, and later on written down in more, written down in different forms, like from Howard Pyle and by Howard Pyle and others. I wonder, I don't even know. I built it up so much now. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but but I'm just trying to kind of voice this desire. Like I don't know if you have anything more to say. I'm just kind of basically I'm hoping this kind of back and forth kind of happens again. We're talking on a recorded medium. We're not talking live. But yeah, what do you think? Or maybe and viewers could chime in too about what they think about the living story kind of being revived and being passed around and gaining gaining vigor and whatnot from people's tellings and everything, not having cannot only the authors,
Yeah,
the
I think
written.
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think it's a fair question. I got a couple things to say. I'll say the sort of second thing first because it's shorter. But I just you were pointing out how, ours is a recorded medium, so it's kind of more akin to like a book or a play or something written down. But it's interesting because it's a recording of an actual conversation,
Yeah.
and we're not, neither of us are reading the story verbatim. You did a very good job retelling it on using your own words. I read a few bits here and there, but like we're using it to kind of like we're bringing it to life between us, and that bringing it to life is being recorded, which, assuming humanity managed to keep digital material alive as long as it's kept written material, it's going to be very interesting to see what having a record of living conversations where they can see our faces, they can see all of my hand gestures that I like to make because I'm part Italian. I talk with my hands. Um, like all of that is recorded and captured for people to see. So it's kind of a different thing, and it touches on what we were
Yeah.
talking about last week about McLuhan and media, but I don't need to go
Yeah.
back into that. But I'm just sort of weaving that little thread in. So it's interesting. But the first point I want to make is you were referencing that storytelling evening I went to, not this Saturday, but the week ago. But it's a group called the School of Mythopoetics here in Portland. I don't know if they have a website. I would plug their website, you guys, if I knew how, but I don't know how. And I don't want to send people to anybody's personal sites because I don't know how that works either. So I'm just
Mm.
trying to be polite. But they did a really good evening. One of them, there was a guy told a Grimm's tale, and a woman told sort of a reconstructed Norse mythology, or Norse myth.
Mm.
And at the end of both of them, they did this really cool thing where they had everybody in the room, once you were done telling the story, everybody in the room would offer back some sort of reflection. Oh, this moment hit me in this way, and I liked this thing, or it reminded me of this in my life, and they described that as feeding the story. So, sort of like you call the story up to entertain you all through the medium of the storyteller, through the mouth of the storyteller, and the story comes and it does its thing, and in doing its thing, it gives out some kind of wisdom or some kind of lesson or some kind of
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
The story feeds you by the telling of itself.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you feed the story by giving some sort of a feedback. So yeah, if anybody's wants to jump in the comments and feed the story a little bit, I'm sure the story would like it.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you. I think that's a brilliant way of thinking about it. I think that's true that yeah, you need this feeding of the story. It's sort of different from like a lecture or something where I mean, lecture often has comments back and forth afterwards, but I'm just sort of simplifying it as in a lecture that's just going one direction and it started off as this thing and it stays this thing when it meets other people. But what you're talking about is something, yeah, going back and forth, something evolving, things being cut, things being changed, reversions back when some things don't work, or and then geniuses maybe every once in a while come forth and they turn, they find something in it or they combine it with something and brings forth a new kind of life. I said this is like an evolution, so they bring forth maybe like a new subspecies of this species, or even a new species, and that species ends up feeding an entire culture or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna argue with the point you said about genius, because I was like, every time you tell the story, you're evolving it a little bit for
Mm,
you and for your audience, and you can switch and you can change, you could forget something,
mm,
you could add something that wasn't there. But then you were like, it has a huge impact on the culture. And I was like, oh yes, that's a genius level. Like being able to impact your culture that way is a different kind of a thing. But I do think every time you tell the story, it comes to life. And I think that one thing I think that is really interesting about that sort of tradition, or that way of managing the stories, feeding the stories that I was just talking about, is like, in the very least, if I listen to a story and I'm like, oh, that was a fun story, and then I go home, I might forget about it. It might not stick
yeah,
in my head. But if I listen to the story and then I engage in a discussion with
yeah,
other people, and I'm like, oh, how does this story apply to my life? And I think about it and I see how it applies to other people's lives. And like, it feeds the story, and like, oh, the story is this entity and we're feeding this entity. It's sort of a ritual, as if the story were like a spirit or something. We're making
yeah,
offerings, but it also feeds the story in your head. It implants it more deeply. It ties it
yeah,
more closely. The medicine of the story gets implanted more into your life than just this thing, this fun tale that you hear.
yeah,
So it kind of feeds the story, like the story gets transplanted into your system, and then you feed that transplantation, you help take it in a little bit more,
yeah,
um, so that the medicine of it can really get deeper into you and start doing its work. So
yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's really something, I forget what it was. Something you said sort of sprung that up for me there.
Yeah, and you're talking about what we're doing in the and conversational podcasts or maybe other podcasts kind of being some kind of version of, even though it's recorded, but some kind of version of living story or living I don't know if this logos applies to this or not. Maybe that's more specific a concept or something like that. But some kind of living word, a story with a structure and certain characters, but it comes to life in the telling. And um, I'd like to think that's what we're doing here. And you mentioned people can comment, and some people do comment, and I've always viewed that as kind of uh, part of part of the dynamic of what we're doing. And I don't think just so there's like you and I are talking now and it's not going out yet. Later on, people are hearing it. And they're listening, they're thinking maybe they're cooking something, they're driving or something, and maybe they talk about it with a friend or husband or wife or something, and it becomes something else, and then maybe they feed it back into the comments, someone else reads that comment. Yeah, I like that whole dynamic, and I've noticed when I read the comments, yeah, I feel like it's part of the conversation, and I'm glad that I didn't have a sort of narcissistic response of sort of like this feeling that this is something that we're the author of, bestowing it from on high to other people, and they can praise, but they don't engage as an equal. I was glad that I didn't feel that way, and that it's kind of, yeah, it's this kind of living thing, and I feel the hunger for that kind of. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about community building, right? And we're, just maybe linking to the sort of natural kind, coming back to nature, coming back to lusty fellowship with others, and awakening in springtime, and of the story that we just read. And yeah, that's sort of what I'm sort of hoping for.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because you have we've talked a lot on here about the meaning crisis. It seems to be kind of a common concern on both of our parts. And I mean, stories are first and foremost meaning carrying
Yeah,
forms. That's kind of what they impart meaning to the listeners. And if
yeah,
it's a resonant story, it imparts deeply because it impresses on them.
yeah.
And a community, like you're saying, whether it's like you were saying with the geniuses earlier, whether it's like society or whether it's just like the community of people who watch this podcast or comment on the podcast or whatever, the to greater and lesser degrees, anything the thing that makes a community is a shared story. It's something, some shared meaning, some shared thing that everybody sort of groups around. So
Mm,
whether it's like the Constitution in America, or the monarchy in back when Robin's sort of the stand-in for the noble king. So the noble king
mm,
figure is sort of it creates some sort of a structure that the community that is the nation is sort of grouped under sort of his auspice, the
mm.
royal family, whatever it is. Not to say that we need another royal family per se, but I think we've maybe evolved past that, I hope. But that it served that function, it served that sort of meaning cohesion,
Mm.
and I think our culture, the meaning crisis as a whole, is a desperate cry for a new story of who we are as humans and what that means to be human and
Yeah.
all that stuff. If we can actually, if somebody can come up with a new story that resonates deeply enough with everyone. And this isn't going to be, oh,
Yeah.
I asked ChatGPT and it gave me an answer. Like I just thought about it for a few minutes and it gave me an answer. Pretty much the same thing. Like this has to be something that rises from the collective unconscious, comes up through one person or multiple people at the same time, this sort of from underneath, bottom up, welling forth of new meaning. That's sort of the birth of the new world or the birth of the new society. Um, I think, in the very least, I think Western civilization is desperately calling for that right now because so many of our institutions are dying because they're based on a story that not enough people believe in anymore. Whether
Yeah.
you want to say that that's the church, the Bible, because that was the sort of pillar of Western, the center pillar of Western civilization for a long time, or whether you want to say science. A lot of people are a little skeptical of science these days for some good and some not so good reasons. It's kind of a gray area. Politics, for a long time, there was sort of this idea of like, oh, well, if we all work together, it'll go well. And before the current sort of political chaos that's going on, a lot of people were very skeptical of politics, of the social structure of the government as a, kind of holding that legitimate rulership. That's another form of meaning, that legitimate rulership. It's a story that we tell ourselves, even if it doesn't have a, beginning, middle, and end, it's still a cohesive thing.
Yeah.
And we don't have that right now for whatever reason. My hope is ours is going through some sort of a alchemical process, sort of a death and a rebirth, sort of something new is coming, so something old has to die for the new thing to come through. And death is a painful process, and we're going through a lot of pain right now, but it's my hope that it's because something new is coming, and that the something new is, well, I'll actually rephrase that real quick and then I'll stop talking. I've been talking for a bit. Um, Something new is coming. I don't think that's deniable. I hope it's something good. And I think that the thing that makes the difference between it being good and bad is how much we willingly participate in the birth process of trying to make sense of this new thing and bring it forth in ourselves as best as we can. If we can do that, we ensure every person that does that ensures it's better by like that their own personal little effort. And maybe enough
Mm.
of us together can kind of create some sort of a overflowing, some sort of a, a little John in the spring moment. Only let's not smash down doors and maybe not steal from the sheriff if we don't have to. Unless the sheriff's being naughty, then we take from the sheriff. Um, but yeah, I did say I was going to stop, so I'm going to stop.
No, I think that's very good. Yeah. Uh, I think it's Harold Bloom, Yale literary scholar. Anyway, last name Bloom,
Harold, yeah.
been talking about how we don't have shared myths anymore. I think he's been talking about this since the 1990s or maybe earlier. And yeah, and you say shared stories, and I'm thinking yes, and especially even shared myths, something that John Vervaeke has talked about a myth as not in our and this definition shows our meaning crisis because we tend to think of myth as something that didn't happen that is an explanation of natural phenomena that ignorant people in the past shared with each other because they didn't know what volcanoes came from or whatever, you know. But John Vervaeke is maybe more of a Jungian kind of definition of a uh, a uh, uh, a perennial pattern in human life, and so it's this story that doesn't make sense because on the surface because people don't come from snakes and what the hell is this even about? But yeah, psychologically and sociologically and so forth, it's a myth that came in that's a distillation like you're talking about from the people from the group and some and this is where the two definitions of genius I think come the genius of the people and then some individual geniuses that are able to tap into that and to articulate it in a particularly good way a Homer or even maybe a Shakespeare would be but something like that where they can articulate it succinctly and that it sticks and the people go yeah this is the thing and it proliferates and it yeah unites everybody with this sort of shared myth.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this stuff. I got a bunch I could say to this. I'll try and hit them all, but very shortly. First thing I want to say is I forget where I heard this. And if it's somebody who I should be quoting, I do apologize, but I've heard it said that it's not that so-called primitive people were dumb enough to take these stories literally. It's that us modern people are too dumb to take them metaphorically, figuratively. We're too
Mm,
dumb to see the meaning because the meaning isn't obvious, it's hidden.
yeah,
It speaks on a level that isn't rational, and we
yeah.
can't see that. And because all we see is rational, and we see that it can't be rational, we assume that these so-called primitive people judged it rationally the same way that we judge it,
Mm,
but they had other means of interacting with story and meaning that we've lost is sort of atrophied in us over time. And so
Mm.
we can't even really easily access the levels. Although, I think with enough analysis, you can kind of start to dig in there and find where the story's still alive and start to feed it the way we've been talking about. But just culturally speaking, when somebody, talks about, Adam and Eve in the Bible, it doesn't make sense. How could there be two people that everybody and the snake and what's this apple thing? And it's totally dumb. It's like, no, it's an allegory. It's a parable, So that's one thing. The other thing, and I'll stop after this real quick though. I'll stop after this, but real quick though. I think it was Young or Campbell said that myths are social dreams in the same way that dreams come with some sort of a message for us from the depths, that myths are something that come from the depths with a message for us.
Yeah.
And I think the and then I think that maybe you know about this. I don't know because I think it's from Plato, but I'm not sure. And if you don't know, then neither of us knows. It's totally fine. But I think I remember the Greeks holding up mythos as a complementary other to logos.
Yeah.
And so there's sort of logos being sort of this like conscious awareness, and mythos being something more chthonic, if I can use that term, more from the depths, from the dark, unexpected. Um, I'm not really an expert in that area, so I can't speak to, but all these things do kind of point to the idea of myth as something other than rational storytelling, something deeper, more symbolic, more holistic, that doesn't make sense maybe here, but you can feel the truth of it here and in your bones. There's just this yes that rises up from the body. And I think that's what we need. And I don't know that we're equipped to really bring that forth as a society. I think it may take some pretty heavy work of, questing for the grail in the wasteland kingdom for a long enough time, until somebody manages to ask the right question at the right time and bring some sort of healing. If I can fall back on a different myth for a moment.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I would quibble with the definition of rationality. I think rationally, with a different idea of rationality, you can understand these stories. I recently heard Vervaeke somewhere give a good formulation where it's something like rationality is knowing when and to what degree and how to be logical. So I think that that's a very good way. So when you're
Mm.
you're hearing this story, you're not saying, "Oh, this story purports to map onto physical reality, and snakes cannot change into humans. So anybody who listens to this story is an idiot." But I think a more wisely rational person would go, people have been telling this story for a long time. Maybe there's something to it. Let's listen. Oh, this person I'm talking to doesn't seem to be a total idiot. So maybe let's talk about it. Oh, and then kind of like you were saying, you can rationally kind of think about it. And a rational person would also be know that I have an unconscious mind and, my life is not just 2 + 2 = 4. And then to know to kind of, yeah, not be, and then even if your logic, if your narrow sort of modern logic starts to take over and you go, the world doesn't work this way, you can reflect on that and go, wait a second. Oh yeah, I'm kind of being a little egotistical here, or I sometimes do this, right? I'm kind of trying to like make other people look stupid and make myself look smart, and and there's kind of a pall in the room after I'm talking, and it doesn't really seem like they believe me, but they don't argue against me. So kind of maybe my psychology is more at work than my rationality. But that was my quibble. Uh,
No, that's fair. And I just want to say really quick, I love that distinction you brought up of rationality as being knowing when to be logical. Because so often the two are combined. It's this,
yeah,
they're synonyms.
yeah,
And I think that I really like that definition too.
yeah, yeah. It's this rationality is something like, yeah, you're using logic with wisdom, and it seems almost obvious when you think of it that way. Like, why would you use logic narrowly without wisdom? That it seems. And then if you look at examples in your own life or others, it seems in social situations, it seems like, yeah, that's such a stupid thing. And It leads to bad relationships and bad decisions uh, and is egotistical and everything.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna. That was only an aside about the rationality part, and I forgot what else I was gonna say. What were? Can you re sort of? What were we talking about before that? It's the Harold Bloom and the
The mythos, the sort of
yeah the
myth as a
mythos over
collective dream.
logos.
Um, yeah,
All right, I've got to
I
take
don't know.
notes.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good conversation. I'm sure we're going to leave threads unfollowed on occasion. If you're listening, leave a comment. Let us know. Let us know what threads we're missing. Maybe we'll pick them up next time if they're rich enough. I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone off into that rationality thing.
But then I wouldn't have had that Vervaeke quote.
Yeah.
I really
That
like that quote. I needed that. I needed to hear that.
Yeah, when I heard that recently, that helped, that fulfilled, that put a necessary piece in place for me to understand rationality. Because you and I have both talked about this, how you kind of need rationality, but yeah, this idea of this strict logic, this I don't know, it's just it doesn't work, and it almost does harm in at least small ways and maybe huge ways too.
Oh,
Oh,
huge for sure. For sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I would say that logic is when when the whole world has to be logical, um the ultimate outcome of that is like extreme fascism because the world is not logical. And if you insist that it is, if you even if you don't insist that the world is logical, like that the world behave in a logical way, if you just see the world only through the eyes of logic, and that's the only sort of filter that you take, you relate to the world with at all, you will incline yourself towards needing to put your will onto other beings because they're not being logical and they should be logical. If you don't have an appreciation for your own non-logical wisdom or your own non-logical emotional needs or your psychology, if you're not aware of that, then when other people are behaving in that way, you're going to insist that they be logical because everything else is a failure. And then people get that's you either accept illogical behavior um or you don't. And if you don't, then you have to stop it. And then you're trying to stop people from doing what's natural to them and not for their own benefit either, but just so you get to have the world behave the way you want it to. And we're in Italy in the 40s with the trains running on time and everybody too afraid to say anything about how unhappy they are.
Yeah, yeah. That reminds me of the Lois Lowry story, The Giver, which is kind of about this imagined kind of perfectly communist society in the future where science has advanced enough to where they can have true communism. And one important part of that society is that they have a rigorous training in the use of words. Words have to be used in this certain way. We could interestingly like contrast this with 1984 and how their words are inherently contradictory and things. But anyway,
Hmm.
um, yeah, and there's a kid that's a little dull in the story, and he repeatedly uses a word in the wrong way, and he ends up being beaten because it's extremely important to use the words in the right way. So everybody is always I don't know what the exact reason, but it's basically so that everything functions in society from your speech to others' behaviors to others' understanding of you. Everything is lucid, everything is clear. There's no ambiguity, which I forgot what thinker it was, but some thinker pointed out, I think, that totalitarian societies are characterized by lack of ambiguity, I think, and of course that's related to purity. Uh yeah, but yeah, that's all I wanted to say is
Oh,
just
okay, I
this
wasn't. I was just
totalitarian,
agreeing.
this
Yeah.
ultimately logical, yeah, this narrowly applied, always applied logic is just it just flies in the face of nature, right? I mean, you can't even tell jokes, right? You can't even do double entendres or anything. So many things that are very useful for human flourishing, for social relations, for group dynamics, for personal happiness, you have to throw those out the window because those do not serve the narrow purpose that the the totalitarian fascist ruler has bestowed, or I don't know what the right verb is, but has uh has put down for everybody to follow no matter what.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because in bringing up the story of the giver, you're talking about a sort of a communistic society, and the totalitarianism there is like we all have to abide by this structure so that society runs smoothly, and you're
Yeah.
impure if you do not belong to the structure. So like what I want to say here, there's an overemphasis on belonging. You must belong to the society. If you do not, then you have failed. Um, and therefore you're outcast or you're killed or you're imprisoned or whatever, something bad happens to you. So it sort of negates the individual entirely.
Oh
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
and then on the other hand, you have the strongman fascism, which I mean, it's always a muddy area when you try and do these split these in two, but what you have on the other side of things is meaning because Stalin was a communist, but Stalin was also a strongman, so he kind of you can't
Mm.
really say it's one or the other. But he kind of had both, I guess. But the strongman fascism is like it's the will of the individual over anybody else, and then so it's sort of emphasizing the individual over the group, and then the strongman, the dictator, becomes sort of the place that everybody projects their individuality onto. Oh, he'll take care
Mm.
of it. If we just do what he says, if we just act as limbs of this person, then so it's all about like the will of the person. He will decide, he will do the thing. That's what we follow. Um, I wish the world would behave in such a way that it did everything I wanted it to, but I'm
Mm.
not strong enough. We need a super individual whose will be that strong, and then we'll all enact that together. So it's similar, but it's focused on like the individual will over everything else, whereas in communism, it's the social structure and no individual will. And what you really want is something where the social structure is important, and having something that functions as a social structure is good, but that social structure reinforces and supports the individual will within that social structure. Um, which is, despite Stalin being both a communist and a strongman, he did not have the social structure that supported the individualism. He sort of used the communistic groupthink as a means of getting everybody under him. So he kind of did both bad things at the same time. Whereas if you look at, the American democracy, there's the law is the sort of common social structure that we all, the Constitution, and the structures of government that it creates and all of that. Like that's the social structure that we all agree to, that if you get off of that social structure, you're in trouble. You break the law, you're in trouble. That works when the law is just, and it doesn't work when the law is not just. And ideally, you have a system to make the law more and more just over time, which is what we've been doing for 250 years to our best ability. Um, but within that law reinforces and supports all the individual rights that we have in the Bill of Rights. And I think you see in the American government system, you see those two social structures combined in a at least somewhat healthy way, um, as an ideal. Obviously, America has never really lived up to that ideal, but you kind of also can't live up to ideals, and it takes a long time,
Yeah.
and you got to work at it. But I think when we're talking about the level of things we're talking about, like that's probably the closest thing we have to a myth in America, and even that isn't holding up anymore, in part due to government shenanigans going back 20, 30, 40 years, and then people not wanting the social structure. So all of the people who were sort of against black people getting the vote, or the works of FDR, the sort of social works, the trying to get society back, the curtailing of the corporations in like the 20s and 30s and 40s. A lot of that stuff pissed off a lot of people, and they're like, well, then we're going to attack the government. And that particular mythology that has sustained America is now, in the very least, under attack. Um, just looking at the past like 20, 30, 40 years, I'm not trying to get into modern day politics. I'm looking at the history of it. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of stuff. I really wasn't expecting to talk politics from Robin Hood, but here we are.
Yeah. But yeah, everything politics is implied with most or all of the stuff that we're talking about. There's the lower level of people getting along, people mutually supporting each other, the being some structure, some control, some rules, and some individuality, some impetuousness or just impulsiveness. I didn't mean to say impetuousness, but impulsiveness. Yeah, just something, some kind of, I don't know, balance between freedom and responsibility. And then, yeah, going up, you need some kind of general kind of structure. And in the Robin Hood tales, it kind of, you know, it talks about the sort of lower to mid level and doesn't get too much into what maybe a good constitution should be or something, but it implies all that stuff. So it makes sense that we'd sort of start to talk about that.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe we'll continue to this is sort of I don't know, like part of what I see as kind of my my helping to give me meaning or my project is to this podcast is sort of named after my name and then open-minded thought and discussion. And I'm trying to kind of learn and receive and give and kind of have something like some kind of community, kind of reviving old stories and maybe bringing new stories into it, and trying to have something of a shared understanding that hopefully, I think like you're implying, will rise and whatever comes in the future, I do hope it's not part of the historical cycle of, terrible war that kind of destroys old structures and out of which eventually out of the ashes rise new one. I hope it's something more like a change in religion or something like that that kind of I sort of look at those two things as like the two things that in history generally bring forth kind of new structure and and mythos. And I hope it's more the religion part than the war part.
I agree. I agree. I think I don't know. I won't go into this too long because I feel like we're wrapping up and we were trying to keep this one short, but
Yeah.
I don't care. Um, um, I think this comes from the Gurdjieff tradition, but there's this idea of this sort of higher energy that comes into the world and um, brings about evolution. And not necessarily, I don't mean like, oh, animals evolving in it. I just mean growth and change over time, that things change in a certain direction. And that to the extent that we are able to be open to that new energy when it comes in and let it come through us and
Yeah, that seems right.
sort of be inspired by it and take action based on it.
Yeah.
Not in a dogmatic do what it says kind of way, but
Mm,
like, ooh, I feel excited I'm going to do this thing, as opposed
yeah.
to, well, I want to, but no, man, I can't, that sort of collapsing in around the energy.
Mm,
Um, that if we're able to do that, then change happens in a sort of natural flowing kind of a way. Like with little John, it may get a little carried away. We might need to adjust ourselves, but we can kind of steer it this way. But when we collapse on it and the energy can't, because the energy's here, it comes in, and if we can't enact it, it has to enact itself in other ways
yeah.
that aren't cohesive and holistic and balanced because we've already said, no, there's no room for you. So it has to go do its thing somewhere else, and it becomes something in opposition to us because we've opposed ourselves to it. Um, and then it has to blow things up because the energy is moving. And when you have a strong force and it hits a structure, that structure is going to get shaken and shaken and shaken until the structure either moves with the force or collapses and the force moves through it. And we're
Mm,
we're at that kind of an inflection point. And I don't
mm.
know where it's going to go, but I'm definitely doing everything I can to get us to move with it. I think that's exactly what you're saying about the podcast too.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And I think that, just like in the name of the podcast, it's a discourse, dialogue, discussion. If we can keep talking, kind of, we can move this energy, mental, physical energy. We can, like Little John and the cook, see each other as friends and not as enemies in a corrupt and sort of lifeless and sort of petty motivating motivation system, and sort of see each other as friends, nature, and then yeah, and then we have some sort of Robin Hood to rein us in when we go a little too far, and then we can make up for it and kind of kind of do what needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm here for all that.
Okay, well, sounds
Yeah.
good. Any last thoughts, or we
Let's
good?
call it. I think that's a good place to end.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Well, great talking to you, Ian.
Likewise.
Okay.
Likewise.